Hello everybody and welcome to Nathan on Shuffle and to my latest episode of New Album Spotlight, the show where I put the spotlight in a new album in progressive rock or related genres that I think fans of similar music as me will enjoy as well, give a brief description and my thoughts about it, my history with the artist, and just tell you if I recommend it and how I feel about it. So I'm going to be doing a couple short reviews this week. I don't know if I have a ton to say about these, and they're, releases that have been out for a little bit of time, and I think a lot of people have already had their chance to review and go in depth about them, but I wanted to add my thoughts because I really love these records and want to recommend them to my general viewership. So first today I have Crown Lands and their new album Apocalypse. This album just came out this past Friday on May 15th, but they've released a good majority of the record before then through different singles. They released their big epic track first from the album, so that's like half of the record right there, and then a couple other singles beyond that. So a lot of people have heard the majority of this record already for several weeks. And I've been really enjoying the record. This is a great duo, Cody Bowles and Kevin Kamau, a Canadian duo. Probably the biggest talking point that everyone points to for this band is that they sound very much inspired by Rush, and I would also add very inspired by Led Zeppelin. Another band that has this that gets accused of this is, of course, Greta Van Fleet, who sound very much like Led Zeppelin as well. But Crown Lands has a bit more of a proggy touch, bringing in that Rush influence heavily. Their previous full-length album was Fearless in 2023, which I reviewed and really loved. That had an epic on it that felt very much Rush-coded. And then they came out with Ritual EPs, Ritual 1 and Ritual 2, which was very much a departure from Fearless, more in this kind of world music vibe, which was interesting and different. Probably not my personal favorite due to my personal taste. They weren't really records that I played over and over, but I respected, and I saw what they were going for, and they were very unique and ambient and had an interesting sound to them. And I think conceptually it was a cool idea because it basically was world building to this world that they're portraying, because the band, they're very much dealing in like fantasy and sci-fi worlds and building these conceptual pieces. And I think Ritual 1 and Ritual 2 really helped add a lot of context to these stories and to these worlds that they're crafting in these records, which leads to Apocalypse, which is very much in this sci-fi fantasy world, some epic moments on the record, and I really enjoy it. It's definitely a throwback to classic rock and classic prog, and it kind of is, to me, like the reverse 2112. 2112 to me is a great Rush album, but it's really separated into two halves. A lot of people talk about it as a concept record, but really there's this big epic to start the record, the title track 2112, which is kind of a self-contained story and epic in and of itself. And then the second side is a bunch of disparate tracks that really aren't as related to the main 2112 epic. On here, this isn't quite the same situation because all of the tracks are in the same world that tell the same story and are all interconnected, but in a similar way. The shorter tracks are on the first side this time around, and then you get the big epic, which is side 2. And to me, they're kind of two different sides to the Crown Lands sound. And I'm much more into the epic side, to the Apocalypse. The shorter tracks are a bit more varied in how I feel about them. Some of them work for me. Some of them are fine, but not really blowing me away particularly. And so that's kind of how I feel about the record. A little bit makes kind of similar to like 2112, but still feel like it's a solid recommendation. Feel like it's one that definitely any prog fan, any classic rock fan, any fan of Rush, and any fan of Led Zeppelin and classic rock in general has to check out. Like, there's a lot to enjoy here. But on the first side of the album, some of the just straightforward rockers don't do a lot for me, like Foot Soldiers of the Syndicate, Black Star and The Fall. There's fun stuff here. I'm not saying they're terrible or anything. I'm just saying that they don't really like connect with me particularly, but I do like the more ballad-esque tracks, Through the Looking Glass and The Revenants one. I think those are really beautiful. And I think a big piece of this is Cody's vocals, where in these harder rock tracks, he gets into this kind of shrieking sound, which is a little bit harsh on my ears, perhaps, which is funny saying as a big Rush and Yes fan and, fan of these like high-pitched vocalists like that. Robert Plant, of course, he's very much in that style vein of like Geddy Lee, Robert Plant. But sometimes it gets a little bit over the top for me, and I think in these rocking tracks, that's kind of where it comes to the forefront the most, where in these more ballad-esque tracks he gets a chance to really sit in the pocket and give a more delicate vocal perhaps that I think works better. I like things that have a little bit more light and shade, that have power and intensity when they need to, but then can also lay back and give your ears a little bit of a break. And I feel like those like more ballad-esque tracks, Through the Looking Glass and The Revenant's one, have that quality to them that make it work better. Whereas the other more rocking tracks are just all kind of high octane, powerful vocals, which kind of, your mileage may vary if you struggle a little bit with the vocal quality, but there's still solid riffs. There's still solid sounds throughout. The production is really well done. Proclamation 1 is a great intro to the record, just a minute and a half with layers of keys and some big choir-like sounds before we get into that classic rock riff of Foot Soldiers of the Syndicate. The Fall is kind of an interesting, cool track as well. Some disco-ish beats almost, kind of like another brick in the wall, leading to like a big 80s arena rock chorus. Black Star is just a cool out-and-out rocker in their typical rock and roll style. So there's a lot to grab hold of. There's some Led Zeppelin nods, especially in those ballad-esque tracks, which kind of bring to mind something like Stairway to Heaven. And it's an enjoyable ride through this first half of the record. But to me, the main feast is Apocalypse, which I think does a great job of bringing in the prog factor, kind of this hybrid of like Cygnus era Rush with, Gates of Delirium, yes. And it's just a wonderful journey through all the different sounds that they're known for. And it kind of reminds me a lot of Gates of Delirium, where there's like some frenetic, chaotic kind of war-style sounds that are exemplified perfectly by the music. And then it kind of ends with a bit of a quiet down, kind of along the lines of the Soon section of Gates of Delirium, but with a little bit more of a rock power in this instance. And once again, you get some of those like high-pitched shrieking vocals as well. But I think it's balanced throughout all of the different instrumental passages and some of the more quieter sections, sometimes where it all kind of goes into more of an ambient feel. But there's just so many nods and references to all kinds of cool classic 70s music. Some Pink Floyd's Animals is kind of in the mix with this cool like rock groove section. You get that Geddy Lee style vocal with Cody in a lot of different moments. You get that Yes style chaos and cool proggy flavor in some of the instrumental sections that happen throughout. And I just think it's a really excellent track that showcases all the best that there can be in prog, so I recommend this album just on the epic alone. And like I said, the shorter tracks aren't bad. They aren't like taking away from the record, really. It's just a different style to me that works sometimes better than others. But I think the album as a whole is still a great journey, a great listen, and I have really come to love it. So that's my impressions of Crown Lands. I hope you will all listen to it and come to your own opinions. And I'm sure a lot of people will be a lot more in love with some of the tracks that I've mentioned than I am, who like that style a bit more. But that's just my impression. I'm kind of the prog guy, so I think when things aren't quite as proggy, it's not as much to my taste, perhaps, where I wish there was a bit more of a proggier feel to the first half of the record. But, there's moments and there's cool parts. Don't get me wrong. But that's kind of my reservation. I'm trying to, come to terms with why I'm not as thrilled with this record as I should be, because on paper, this should be right up my alley and something that's, should be on the top year-end list of my favorite records. And it's still a high-ranking record for me, but it doesn't quite reach those heights for some reason. And I think it's maybe this unevenness and the fact that sometimes they're just straight out-and-out rockers don't really land for me quite as well as some of the more prog-infused stuff that they do. So, and I think Fearless kind of had a similar style to it. It had that similar where the first big epic track was really what I was coming for. And then some of the shorter rockers, some worked, some didn't, it was kind of a variable quality. So maybe that's just kind of how I'm going to feel about the band in general, but that's kind of my takeaway. But still, one of the most promising young bands, very impressive what they're able to accomplish. And I see a bright future ahead for them. This record is their first full-length record on Inside Out. So I'm sure there's many more to come, and it's cool that it seems like the band really got to do what they're passionate about. And I think the storytelling and the way they've been able to capture everything that is important to them, like that comes through on the record. The passion that they have for this music and for this storytelling mechanism is definitely really well felt. So there you have it. That's my review of the new Crown Lands record. Let me know in the comments. I'm sure a lot of you have heard it and have your own thoughts and opinions, and I'd be interested to see what you guys think about it. So thank you guys for watching this review, and I'll hopefully catch you guys in a future one. Bye everybody. Enjoy the music.